Welcome back for another episode of Branching Out with Sierra. In today's episode, I wanted to talk about a recent situation I found myself in and the reflections that came after that event. Today's episode is called Same Room, New Lens, the power of revisiting what you already know. So let me tell you about the situation I found myself in. So I went to an event last week that was a learning day, and without knowing it, it was almost exactly to the day, an entire year after the previous learning day I had attended with this organization. And as I sat there and started listening to the presentation, I was diligently taking notes, and I was very engaged. Maybe 15 to 30 minutes into it, and during the first exercise that we were doing, the reflective activity, I realized that I had heard this information before, and I felt like the visuals in front of me were also something that I had seen before. Well, I don't have a great memory, so I was pretty surprised that I could even remember it. So I decided to look back in my notes, so I hopped on my Remarkable, and I looked back at the organization that I was taking this through. I looked back at that folder, and I immediately found notes from April of 2024. And as I clicked on those notes, I found that I was writing down the same exact words in the same exact order and taking the exact notes from a year before. However, when that hit me, I had a moment where I thought, well, that's going to be a waste of time. If we're learning the same exact thing as I learned a year ago, then I feel like I'm going to waste this entire day. But then something clicked in my head because I realized that if I remained present and I sat through that learning day as if it were my first time, and I reflected and I did the exercises they recommended, that actually learning the same content over again could have been very valuable for me. And so this is what I found. I went through those exercises, and then at the end of the day, and some throughout the day because I couldn't resist, I bounced back and forth between the notes in my Remarkable, and I was able to compare how did I respond to this question a year ago today. How were my reflections similar? How were they different? Where am I a year later in my business? And I also picked up on new things in the content that I hadn't really noticed before. The notes were written, but they didn't stick with me. So as I was preparing for today's episode, I thought about sometimes when people around us are sharing information or we've experienced something before, it's really easy to tune it out and think, I've already heard this before. I already know this. So even though that material was the same for me, I was different. I was hearing it with new ears. It was like a new filter that I had, and I felt like I was walking away with something really powerful. So that's why I wanted to do today's episode and really explore how having a similar experience or learning the same thing over again that you've experienced in the past might actually be of great value. So we all do this sometimes. You might be talking to someone, talking to a friend, and they start to tell you a story that you know that they've told you before. I have several people in my life who do this, and we always joke about, oh, they're telling that same story again. If someone's elderly and has a little bit of dementia, it seems a little more appropriate to just keep listening and nodding and smiling and going with it and being enthusiastic as if it's the first time you've heard it. But if they don't have a good excuse for it, sometimes it can actually be a little bit annoying to hear the same thing over and over again. And I completely admit that I will tune out. I will start thinking about what I'm supposed to be doing next. My plan for the next day. My mind is always going a million miles an hour and probably thinking about my business in some capacity. And it's really hard for me to stay focused because I feel like I'm not getting anything out of this conversation by listening to this, over again. But I really, after this experience last week, I started thinking more and more about it. And I feel like that's the complete opposite approach I should be taking. So I was thinking about how, one of the ways in which we consume knowledge is reading a book. So, I have hundreds of books, self-help books, leadership books, all sorts of books, more than I can ever read. And I tend to pick up the same book that I've read in the past over again. So, for example, the Bible. A lot of people have read through the entire Bible. And you might hear, someone trying to go through a learning plan where they're doing a Bible in a year, right? Can I read the entire Bible in a year? And then the next year, they're doing it over again. And someone might ask, well, why are they doing that? They just read it. Well, if you've read the Bible before, you will understand that each time you read the same exact scripture, you might take away something completely different. Because you're in a different place in your life when you experience it the next time around. So I can read the same passage over and over and over again and reflect in a completely different way, take away new insights and things that I can apply in my life. Well, it's the same thing. When someone's talking and telling a story, I can take away something different every single time. If I listen to that story, I can listen to specific details. I can use that information to learn about the person in front of me. What new information can I gather about them, as to how they approach telling this story, which is obviously something that's important to them. So I really want to explore that idea and how we should be tuning in even more when we're experiencing something for the second, third, fourth time, how this is actually an opportunity. It's not repetition, it's reinforcement of the same message over and over again in a new experience. So as I go through this episode, I want you to think about, whether you have that friend that tells the same story over and over, or really likes, maybe they're a subject matter expert and they really like something. So maybe my dad talks about trees all the time, and I could have the perspective of, I think you've already taught me all about that tree before, but I tend to actually not retain the information anyway, so it's helpful to hear it over again. But where have you experienced that, where you catch yourself starting to tune out and think that you don't need to hear it again? So that's where I'm going to encourage you to really think about some examples that apply to your life. Here's another one. I got my initial certification to be a leadership coach, speaker, trainer through John Maxwell. And Maxwell Leadership provides twice annual, so I guess it'd be biannual, conferences that you can go to, and you can learn from John and from his team. And a lot of times the content is very similar. However, every time that I attend that conference, I feel like I'm totally energized and ready to go back and apply new things. I can hop on the online training program and I can find the exact programs I experienced in order to get my certification. And I love going back and looking at all of that over again. I actually put on my goals for this year to go back and revisit the coaching program and go through all the training on coaching again. I spend hours upon hours in coaching every week. I get tons of practice with it, and I do feel like it is a craft that I will forever be growing in. But I want to go through that from start to finish as if I'm being exposed to it the first time, because I really do think I'm going to pick up things that I didn't notice before, I just didn't hear, or maybe at the time I felt like it was over my head. And maybe now I can actually grasp those concepts in a new way. So I don't feel like I'm ever really going to be finished with that content. And that's the wonderful thing about this program is I will forever have access to it. So what is that thing that you feel like maybe inside and out, really well, that you could go back and revisit, whether it's a book, whether it's a training program that you've experienced, whether it's a conversation with a friend that you feel like you could experience through a different lens. I really feel like I have been missing out on so much because I haven't leaned into that as much as I could in the past. So I think where the need really lies is for us to, I always talk about reflecting and asking questions, to remain curious in these conversations with people, to ask questions, to dig deeper, rather than having a surface level conversation. Is there a way that we can take that conversation and ask questions to help that individual even look at it from a different perspective? I was recently talking to someone who was discussing how important it is in their role to remain neutral and see things from both perspectives. So, for example, right now in our political climate, where it's very divisive, when you state how you feel about something, someone's either going to really support you or you're going to very quickly lose a friend, it seems. So I was having this conversation with someone about how they said that it's great that they find themselves able to always see things from both sides. And when I thought about that, I think that I can too. If you were to take pretty much any situation, I can pause and try and see it from the other person's perspective, revisit from my perspective, and hopefully find something to meet in the middle, but ask questions to explore it more, right? That's the thing. When you have these conversations with someone and you feel like it's surface level, how can you ask questions to dig deeper into why these things are important to them and what experiences they have had that have led them to the beliefs that they have? Where did they learn? What are their traditions? Where were these things modeled for them? And how did they come to believe what they believe today? So I just feel like it's been this pattern in my life recently where this message keeps coming up over and over and over again, to where I think others could benefit from revisiting what they already know with this lens that I'm talking about. Because, in a discussion this morning, I was talking to someone about HR, and they said you can be an HR generalist and you can go about an inch deep and a mile wide and just know a little bit about everything. Or you can be someone who is more of an expert in a specific area, and maybe you really love HR benefits. That would not be me. That would not be something I enjoyed, but maybe you want to be someone who digs really deep into that topic and becomes an expert on it and the go-to for that topic. Again, this keeps coming up. Who do you want to be? Well, I would rather know a little bit about everything, but be known for being a subject matter expert in specific areas. So, for example, my DISC assessments that I do. When I first did my DISC training, it was so over my head. I could not understand the concept. The graphs that come out of a DISC report made no sense to me. And actually, Dr. Dave, who lives here locally, he recently passed away, and it's been very upsetting for this community. He was the leader of Dr. Dave Leadership Corporation, and then he went through a rebranding. But he and I, when we first met, we connected on DISC because DISC was something that he taught. It was something that he used to assess his clients. And I could tell that he knew a lot more about DISC than I did. And so we sat down together and talked about it. I had gone through the whole training. I had become technically at consultant level, but I still felt like I could better understand. I needed to better understand what was coming out in these 45-page reports. What were the important pieces that I needed to share with my clients that could really help them? What questions do I need to be asking? And at this point, I know for a fact that I've done over 1,000 assessments. And I am so much more confident today than I was then. But I'm thinking about going through that coursework again, that DISC consultant level coursework, just to see if there's anything that I missed, anything that I would be able to expand upon for my clients to bring more value. So if I have this mindset that I am now this DISC expert because I have a certification, and I think I know everything there is to know about it, and I've done it 1,000 times, and I'm so passionate about it, and people see the value in it, so I'm just going to stop there. I think that mindset is only going to hurt me. I want to dig as deep as possible into this. I want to be the person that people think of when they think of DISC assessments. If I'm going to take a DISC assessment, I want to do it with Sierra because I know that she is a subject matter expert and is going to help me to get more value than if I go on to 16personalities.com and take a free assessment and figure out a couple letters that identify my style. Hopefully you understand what I'm saying here. I really want in this episode for people to be more reflective about whether or not they want to dig deep with certain things in their life and keep growing and growing and growing in that area. What is it that you want to be an expert at? Because I encourage you to go back and start reading the same books over again, taking the same training over again, find a mentor on that topic where you can continue to dive deeper and deeper. So something else that I was thinking about was the reflective practice of journaling. So journaling can be hard to get into if you're not someone that typically journals because I think honestly it takes practice, just taking your thoughts, putting them on paper, and reflecting in a way that really does help you to better get to know yourself. It's almost like having a conversation with yourself, right? Sometimes when you're journaling, you are learning more about who you are and how you process things and information. And I was thinking about a journal prompt that might be helpful. Is there something that you've been holding off on doing because you think you need something new? Like we talk about shiny object syndrome, right? We often jump to the new exciting thing and the old becomes dull and boring over time. Is there something you've been putting off exploring because you feel like you're going to this new thing? You have to go to the new thing because it's more exciting. I would have you reflect on, what is that thing you could instead dig deeper into? Whether it is something in your career, it can be related to what you've studied professionally, or it can be a hobby that you want to know and understand better. I received what I would consider surface level exposure to guitar at a young age. And at the time, I thought I was a really good guitar player, which is comical now. But I learned to read music. I learned to pick the individual notes. And when I stopped playing, I was just learning chords. That is something that was of interest to me, but, I put the guitar away and the music books on the shelf and I didn't touch it for so many years. And rather than this period of time where I could be exploring a new hobby, I decided to pick the guitar back up again and figure out how can I build off the knowledge I already had. I can still pick individual notes. It took me maybe 2 times sitting down with the guitar to remember how to read music again. But this time, I'm going to take a different approach, and I am going to learn how to play chords. And I want to learn to be able to listen to music and be able to know what chord to play. So when I'm playing guitar and my dad's playing fiddle, that I don't have to look at a sheet of music to be able to hear what chords I should be playing that go along with his notes. Or for me to be able to tune my guitar without turning on an electronic tuner and needing that device. But see, instead of going and learning something new about a completely new topic, I'm deciding to take a different approach on something I already know. So I think you're probably getting the gist of this. I think that this is something that continues to build our toolbox, something that we can continue to focus our growth on, not checking out, not thinking that, we know it all about a topic and we don't need to listen anymore. I think that that's a really big mistake that I had been making. I feel like I could be more present in some conversations with people that are close to me because, I might already be thinking, yeah, I've heard that before. And I really think I could have benefited from better listening. So I want you guys to hold me to that too. So if you're in my life and you see me checking out, call me out on it and say, yeah, you might have heard this before, but I think you really need to listen because I think that I could really find value in that. The other thing that I was thinking about in preparation for this episode are some of the other tools in my toolbox that you guys hear me talk about. So I talk about my full focus planner all the time. I talk about my Remarkable all the time. Those tools are tools that I have gotten to know over the years and I'm very, very familiar with. And people come to me to learn how to use the full focus planner, or they come up to me and say, what is that device you're using? And I'm so passionate about telling them. But I'm still exploring new ways all of the time to use the tools in my toolbox. So just last week, I had a client come to me and say, I came up with this really creative way. I've inserted this into my full focus planner. I showed my team, and my team was interested in doing the same thing, and they've expanded upon the use of the planner. Or I had someone come to me and say, have you ever thought about using the planner feature on your Remarkable so you have a digital version of your planner? So I started to explore those templates and what would that look like. So think about the tools in your toolkit that you're using on a regular basis that are a part of your life, and think about ways you could approach them differently, use them differently to have a better outcome. That was something else that popped out to me. So hopefully as you're listening to this, you are identifying ways that you can, be a better listener and go deeper, dig deeper into conversations, into topics, into the tools that you have. I think it is easy to stop and question if you're sitting in the right room. Should you be in this room? Is this the one that you need to be in to continue learning and growing? You can learn a lot from being in the same room over and over again. And I actually think I'm going to go back to that content from last week, and I am going to take time to not only dig deeper myself, but to share it with Erica and talk about what she saw in that content. I want us to keep thinking about the different lenses. So this week, I am challenging you to revisit something maybe you learned in the past, revisit something you used to love, maybe something you spent a lot of time doing, and for some reason, it's no longer a part of your life, whether it's due to time or your interests have changed. And question, is there a way that I can experience this through a different lens, through the lens of who I am today, rather than the lens of who I was when I first experienced it? That's my challenge for you guys this week. I know it's a bit of a shorter episode, but this topic popped into my head because I often sit down and think, what have I experienced that maybe the listeners could benefit from? And I just wanted to briefly kind of let you in on my thinking. So the branching out challenge, you know it. You know what to reflect on, but I want to hear from you. If you are going to try and experience something you have in the past through a new lens, let us know. I want to know what it is you're experiencing or what you thought after seeing that thing from a new perspective, from who you are today rather than who you were in the past. I have to always share that it is important that you guys are subscribing so that you are getting notifications when these episodes come out at noon Eastern Standard Time every single Friday, except the ones where we might have a little technology mix up here and there. But we're coming up on 1 full year of weekly episodes without a missed week. We almost missed a week, but we ended up being able to get the technology to work and released it just a couple of days late. So we're coming up on a full year with 52 episodes, and I hope that if you haven't heard previous episodes that you might go back and listen from the beginning and try and experience them. Or if you have extra time and you learned anything from this episode, maybe you can go back and listen to my first episode and see if you hear things differently than you did the last time. Well, that's all for this week. I hope you found value in this episode and can apply it to your life no matter where you are, no matter what position you find yourself in. That's the goal here, that this is leadership for everyday life. And leadership means leading yourself effectively as well. All right, until next time, keep branching out.